All of the problems I work through in my videos can be downloaded from accountingworkbook.com. If you'd like a copy for yourself, just click the PDF link and you can download a copy to your computer. Also found on the website are links to all of my accounting videos, not just the ones here on YouTube that are publicly listed. They're also members only videos. About 40% of my videos are free and open. The other 60% are for members. If you click one of the members links, it'll take you to a page that looks like this, says members only content. If you'd like access to that content, just hit the join button. Okay, let's jump into the problem. Let's take a look at problem 12.2a, a drop or retain a segment problem. So this is when you have a part of your business seems to be doing poorly and other parts seem to be doing better, and you're thinking, should I be even in this line of business anymore? Like, should I drop part of my business and just focus on the other stuff that seems to be making me the money? That's the question before us. So let's take a look. Allmart is a department store with 3 major departments: housewares, hardware, and electronics. Company management is very concerned about the performance of the electronics department, noting that it seems to be a drag on the company based on its most recent financial quarter. A company-wide segmented income statement follows, and you can see electronics is losing 30 grand. The company overall is making 30 grand, but of course, if they could just get rid of electronics, it's like, well, we could be making 60, right? If we just combine these two, 40 and 20, we would get 60. So the electronics is dragging us down. And so there's some debate as to whether they should keep or get rid of electronics or just change something fundamentally about it. The company notes that if the electronics department were dropped, the other departments could expect a 10% decrease in foot traffic and sales. So it's a department store. Of course, somebody goes in to buy some electronics, they might walk out with some hardware or housewares as well. And so they're thinking they're going to lose some business if they get rid of electronics. Also, $20,000 of electronic department's fixed costs are allocated and would continue even if the department was dropped. So, for example, the property taxes, right? The company pays whatever it pays in property taxes, gets rid of the electronics department. It can't get rid of the property taxes, those fixed allocated costs. The company has no planned use for the space currently used by the electronics department. Compute the net dollar advantage or disadvantage of dropping the electronics department. I'm going to show you how to do this 2 ways. The first way actually doesn't really use relevant cost. It just sort of looks at the situation and analyzes it. The second one is a pure relevant cost analysis. I like the first way better because I think it's simpler. That's the way I explain it, and that's the way I think about it in my mind. But some textbooks might call for you to do this in an incremental analysis or something like this, a relevant cost only analysis. So I'll show you the second way after, more as an FYI than anything. So the way I like to do it is I like to just recreate the income statement as if I didn't have electronics. So what would my income statement look like then? So I've got sales, of course, I've got variable expenses, I've got contribution margin, fixed expenses, and operating income loss. So I've got housewares, I've got hardwares, and I've got electronics and a total. So if I get rid of, and I'll start with electronics, if I get rid of electronics, the sales of electronics department will go to 0 because I don't have an electronics department. The variable expenses go to 0. The contribution margin goes to 0. The fixed expense of the department, unfortunately, do not go to 0. $20,000 of the electronic department's fixed costs are allocated and would continue. So I've got to eat $20,000 of the electronic department's costs regardless. And so there's still a bit of a losing proposition here, but losing less. Unfortunately, though, my other departments take a 10% hit, right? Decrease in foot traffic and sales. So when I look at housewares, its sales aren't going to be 150, they're going to be 10% lower. 10% lower is 135. And the math there is just 150. 10% drop means I'm keeping 90%. 150 times 0.9 is 135. 10% off our variable expenses would be 10% of 60 is 6. So 60 minus 6 is 54,000. 135 minus 54. Good grief, I can't do this in my head here. I think I can actually. 81. Fixed expenses, 50,000. 81 minus 50 gives us 31,000 in operating income in housewares. In hardwares, 220 minus 10% is 198,000. 100 minus 10%, that's 90,000. So our operating or our contribution margin here rather is 108,000. Our fixed expenses remain at 100. So 108 minus 100 is 8,000. So adding this across, 135 plus 198, our total sales, if I could hit the button, is 333. 54 and 90 is 144. 108 and 81 is 189. So, and also 333 minus 144 should be 189. Our fixed expenses, 170. So our profit here, our operating profit anyway, is 189 minus 170 is 19. And again, this should add across just as well. I always like to have dollar signs at the top and bottom of any financial column. And there we have it. So if I keep the department, retain the segment, I expect to make $30,000. If I drop the segment, I expect to make $19,000. What is the dollar advantage or disadvantage of dropping the segment? Well, I'm $11,000 worse off. Whoa, $11,000 worse if I drop the segment, right? The electronics department. So to answer the question, the net dollar disadvantage of dropping the electronics department is 11K. So that's a very direct answer to the question. We are $11,000 worse off if we drop the electronics department. Now, I'll answer the question this way in my classes, and once in a while, some student will raise their hand and they'll go, these were not relevant costs. Like the $20,000 we keep in the company, that's specifically not relevant. It's not different. If I drop the segment, I have this $20,000 in allocated costs. If I keep the segment, I have $20,000 in allocated costs. Isn't this like the opposite of relevant cost analysis? And they're right. It kind of is. So here's a shorter analysis that gets the same answer using only the relevant costs. So the main reason you would drop a segment is to save fixed costs. So let's start there. Fixed costs saved. If I drop electronics, well, how many dollars in fixed costs am I saving? I lose the 90,000 in fixed costs, but I'm stuck with 20. Overall, I save 70K, right? Like that's the whole purpose. We're dropping the segment. We're going to save all those costs. So we're going to save 70K. That's good news. And that's the reason we've dropped the segment. But we also lose contribution margin. CM lost from electronics, right? I don't run an electronics department anymore. So CM lost from the electronics department is, it was 60, it's going to 0, so we lose $60,000 in contribution margin. But if that's all that happened, I'm still $10,000 better off. However, I also lose CM from my other departments. I lose 10% of my contribution margin from the housewares department. So whatever my contribution margin was, my sales go down 10%, my variable expenses go down 10%, my contribution margin goes down 10%. I lose 10% of 90,000, I lose 9,000. And I lose 10% of my contribution margin from hardware. It was 12,000, or 120,000, so I lose 10% of that. It's 12,000 that I'm losing. So if I add this up, the overall net advantage or disadvantage of dropping the electronics department is 70 minus 60 minus 9 minus 12. Let's do it in the calculator. 70 minus 60 minus 9 minus 12. I get negative 11. So there is a disadvantage of $11,000 to dropping this segment. And if you take a look, the answers are identical. Now, I would never ask my students to solve it two ways, but maybe you look at this and think, well, this way was easier for me. And if that's the case, that's fine. That's totally appropriate. When I think about these problems, I think of them this way. So that's the way I go to first. It makes the most sense to me. But if this bottom one made sense to you, that would be great. And you know, the thing that would make the most sense for me is if you made it to the end of the video, don't be shy about hitting either one of those buttons. Thanks a lot for watching and have a good day. Bye for now.